Hi, how are you feeling today?
Hi, Molly. Um, I feel in a slow motion today.
Mm, yeah, it's one of those nice, slow, cozy days, um,
Yeah,
which I think is probably perfect for our conversation today.
I think it is.
Fantastic. So we're doing things ever so slightly differently today on Between Us. And Eleanor is going to have a chance to dive into her story and her passions behind being a coach as well. So where would you like to start with that today?
I guess the best is to start from beginning of the story, or well, it's not really beginning, but what the story that in one moment can create who you are, where that story started in the first place.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot that can happen to us in our stories as we move through life and have different experiences. So, I guess a good place to start with might be what age were you when this story started for you, and who were you at that age?
So, what I believe that my story started probably from the moment when I was born, like everyone else. But what was the beginning of who I am today actually started when I was hardly 20, um, 19 years old, and I genuinely did not know who I was. And I don't mean in a way people sometimes say that really lightly. Oh, I didn't know who I was. I mean, I had no real relationship with myself. Um, I had grown up absorbing mm, beliefs about my own worth, um, that I needed to earn my place, that I'm not quite enough, um, that love sometimes you need to deserve that. And then I couldn't name those beliefs, but I lived definitely inside all of them. And then I got pregnant. And then I got married. And what is very important to say, I was not even in love with that man. And it matters. I was, as I said, hardly 20, and I was quite rebellious against life that already felt too small for me. Um, Not that I really have any idea what can I do or want instead of that. So the marriage happened because life moved much faster than I was ready for that, and I walk into it already carrying something very fragile, and I didn't know how to see that in myself. I did not have anyone to give me the right mirror so I can see that. So that's how the whole story began.
Mm, thank you for sharing that. And I mean, what an interesting space to be in, being 19 and pregnant and suddenly getting married, knowing that you're not in love, but life is moving really quickly and you're just suddenly trying to keep up. Um, I mean, I can't imagine what that would be like to be in that position, but I imagine it would have been slightly scary.
Not slightly, it was very scary. It is like you standing alone against the whole world. Um, you have all these people around you with the perfect advices, and none of them know who you are. Um, they don't know the way I'm thinking and feeling. They don't know what is my dreams, but they know very well what is good for me. And when I say group of people, I also thinking about my family too, and everything that I built in my head probably comes from the family and environment where I was growing up. And there was no one to actually help me to understand where was I. This is the moments when you don't need really anyone to give you advice. Maybe someone who will sit with you and listen and knows how to ask the right questions. Now, how did I know that I am in trouble? Actually happened exactly with the questions, not the violence, with the questions. Every day, relentless about where I had been, who I had spoken to, what I had said, what I had meant by it. Um, you see, my first husband, he was consumed by jealousy. And in a way that I now understand, um, was its own kind of sickness where his mind was building a story. And I had no part in creating. And I answered honestly, every question, every time. I believed that honesty would be enough. That if I explained myself clearly and calmly, he would see the truth and he would be satisfied. But unfortunately, that's not how that kind of mind works. Um, the truth was never the point. The interrogation was the point. And no answer I gave was the right answer because there was no need for the right answer, just for the next question by him. And it took me a long time to actually understand that. Um, you kept trying harder to explain yourself in those situations, and the more I tried that, the more I felt something is wrong with me. And that is exactly how it works. That's how it begins. Um, it did not begin with a fist, it began with a question you cannot answer because there is no right answer.
And I mean, what a journey to go on as well from what you've said, being 19, being pregnant, going into a marriage because you've got these people around you who you believe genuinely have your best interests at heart. And I'm sure they believe that as well, with telling you that,
Mhm.
yes, this is the right path. And then being in that marriage and, like you said, starting to get those questions, starting to realize that maybe something's a little bit off here. And I'd really like to check in with you and see what was the point when you knew yourself like internally that something was wrong.
I did ask myself that question many times. And for many years, I didn't want to admit. But from the very beginning, it's for me was not normal to spend the day answering the questions, explaining, rather than just being happy because you are with a person you love. You are creating your own small family. There is a child on the way. But not having the right tools and probably not being in a safe place, all these, how can I call them, like a positive thoughts that could help me to build the strength in a situation, I put them away. That's the moments when you start slowly but surely abandoning yourself, abandoning your dreams and wishes one by one, thinking that all that is wrong and it does not belong in this new kind of life. So, to answer your question, yeah, I think we all know from the beginning that something is not right, but not many of us is ready or know how to listen that voice. It's very quiet, it's very subtle.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we've talked about before, where we're not taught to trust that voice. We're not taught to trust ourselves
Exactly.
with it. And it is a really hard thing when you're doing all the things that you've been told are the best for you, and you're showing up and you're doing all things that everyone around you is showing you what to do to be a good person, to be on the right path in life. And having that inkling that this is not, this is actually not right, something is wrong here,
Yeah,
can be even harder to listen to when everyone around you is going, oh, yes, but you've done all the right steps to get there. So if something's going wrong, maybe you did something wrong. It's what we start to naturally think because we're not
yeah,
taught to have those conversations, to build those relationships, like you were saying before, where we have that support, where we can go to someone and say, I just want to be heard. Can you just listen to me? And you're almost asking, can you see my situation as mine, not as what you think it should be? And
exactly.
then can I have some support from that space as well? Um, I know you mentioned before that you did have your family and the people around you. Did you end up finding along this journey, did you end up finding people who you could sit down and have that support with and did feel listened to?
Um, I had support of my family, which I was scared the most that they will reject me, but they didn't. They were there for me, especially my mom. But what is very important to say is when I finally left, something else is happening with your mind. I talk about what happened to me a lot. I mean, to anyone who would listen. And for a while, that was absolutely necessary. Um, I was trying to make a sense of uh, something that had no sense in it, right? Um, but at some point, and I couldn't tell you exactly when, I crossed a line. I stopped talking about my experience and I actually start performing it. Um, the story of what happened to me actually become the most interesting thing about me. Um, the thing that explained everything, the thing that made people, lean in and listen. So, what was going on? My nervous system was in survival mode for 11 years. That's how my first marriage lasts. And it found a way to protect me while I was experiencing all that abuse, with staying quiet, um, ignoring the situation, abandoning myself, or whatever was going on through my head then. But now I am safe. The abuser do not exist anymore, and my nervous system needed to create a new story. So this one that I was telling was also a way to protect myself. I needed to look at myself honestly, not with the self-blame. Um, I didn't want to be just another version of myself that abuser created about me. Um, I wanted to look into myself with clarity, and I couldn't because I already created another identity, which is identity of victim. And this is what actually is happening to many women. Um, you come out from that kind of relationship carrying on a lot of shame. And as much as I had protection by my family and support from my friends or community, I was very lonely in that story, carrying that shame. And same time, trying to protect myself, I was, I, I can't say that I enjoy in that new identity, but that new identity was like a safe place for me to be a victim, and I don't have to give too much explanation what happened and why the things happened. So in one moment, you have to choose. Do you want to keep that, how can I call it? Like, huh? Is that how you call, to protect myself?
Yeah.
Or, yeah, or I want to find out who am I actually if I'm not a victim. And it was very scary. You identify yourself as one person, and if I don't have that, who am I? And
And
it's
it's
not something, yeah, you can't decide it that overnight. And I want people to be aware how you can be in that space for many, many years if you don't have understanding from others.
absolutely, and I definitely think it's an important thing that you've mentioned there with I think there's sometimes a real innocence when we come out of a abusive relationship or out of a situation where we do start to tell that story and that becomes our identity. And I think there's two reasons that that happens sometimes. And one is this real innocence of wanting to connect so badly that we're
Exactly.
just pulling out all the vulnerable parts of ourselves, saying, please love me, please hold me, please support me, please see me. And that is a part of the healing as well, is having those needs met. Um, Maybe not in the best way, but sometimes that's all we have and that's all we
Yeah,
know at the time. And I think sometimes the other reason it happens is because when you come out of those situations, there's this very natural victim space that you do go into when you go in to do the healing. And it is a part of the story. And if you don't go into that space to do the healing, then a lot of the times you're probably disassociating and you're probably just ignoring it. But like you said, there is that line where we're doing the healing, we're, discussing it with a therapist, whoever we're speaking to, we're trying to make those connections and understanding where is the difference between this is something that happened to me and this is who I am. And I think you talked about that beautifully of having that distinction and being able to go, um, one, finding the places that are not only safe, but also appropriate to talk about it, and
exactly.
relearning different ways to connect with people, I think is also probably a really important thing that a lot of people maybe lose when they're in these situations is that understanding of how to connect in a safe way and in a healthy way. Um, and I wonder, did you have any moments after you came out of that marriage when you realized that that story had become yours? Was there any moments where you were really able to drop into starting to connect with people from the space of who am I now?
That was the problem. Um, I don't think people can handle a sad story very well. Probably, we all carry on our own, I don't want to say traumas. It's used very often lately, but we carry on some kind of painful story, and we will rather avoid being in the same space with the person who is especially experiencing something like that. So we are not equipped to have a conversations around that in a right way, in, in a way where you won't push that person even deeper, where you won't put another layer on a pain that that person already experienced. And like I stayed in a marriage in that abusive situation for 11 years, and one of the questions that people often ask me was, why did you stay so long? Why didn't you leave earlier? You know, and every time when they ask me, it was like they opening my heart again and again. Because um, for me, inside, staying has a lot of sense in that moment. Um, when someone tells you every day in a different ways that you are worthless, bad mother, bad woman, nobody would ever want you, and so on. Something happened inside you that has nothing to do with, your strength or your intelligence. That's the moment when the nervous system go into survival mode. And, you know, it doesn't mean when I say survival mode, it's not like, oh, in a movie, you are in survival mode and someone fights back and, run away. No, this is much vital. You adapt to the situation. You make yourself smaller. You make yourself less visible. And this is not something that will disappear in one moment once when you leave the situation. But it's also not a weakness. I want um, people to be aware of that. It's a pure biology. Our nervous system is doing exactly what is designed for, to protect you. It will create all these patterns and responses and excuses why you actually have to stay in that relationship. And leaving the relationship and being asked, why did you stay? Well, to answer that is really hard, and it's not easy. And as I said, it's just breaking my heart all over again. And can brings a lot of anger, which it did in myself. The other thing that was very hard, and I learned this is what is hardest for the victim, is when people turn their head and they don't want to be part of something that they are aware it's happening. And then you don't know where to turn and who to ask for help. So that's one more reason why people stay. It's not because you don't see what's going on and you don't know better. It's just because you already thought yourself before you even come into that situation, um, that you have no choice.
And that's something I
So,
think, yeah, we've talked about before is remembering that we do have a choice, always have a choice. But you're very right. A lot of people in a lot of situations, especially those ones, feel like they don't have a choice. And like you said, it can
exactly.
be really hard to look towards what is happening, especially if that's a reality that you don't particularly want to acknowledge that you're in. And I think you're right, that can be sometimes the hardest part for people. And it can be very brave and very courageous to leave and to actually look at it and to actually acknowledge it,
Yeah.
as well as go out and receive the support for it. Um, I know that you mentioned in there that it was really hard when people kept asking you, why did you leave? And I wonder, if there's anyone out there that is supporting someone that's in a similar situation to what you were in, is there a question that you would have liked to be asked at that point that actually would have been supportive for you as opposed to continuing to open the wound?
Maybe another question. I would have liked to have someone who will tell me what I want to say now to anyone who is maybe going through the same situation. And that's, first of all, it's not my fault. I was convinced that whatever is happening to me, I caused it and it was my fault. And I felt guilty for everything. Um, the second hard one is a shame that you feel because of um, abuse that you're experiencing. You feel responsible. So I hope that I didn't have, but I hope that anyone who is going through that will have that one person who will allow them to speak. Um, when I say speak, speak through shame you feel, um, speak imperfectly, doesn't matter, even partially. Um, you don't have to walk through, when I say shame, we tend to wait until shame go away and then we open up, and that's kind of happened to me. And um, I did not regret, but I would like that I knew that earlier. It's the shame is not like a door that you have to, you walk through first and then you start talking. You can speak even if it's there. So no, it's not a question, it's more permission to say what's going on, what am I experiencing without judgment.
Yeah.
I was facing a lot of judgment those days and after I left, from the people who I did not know. I'm not talking about, oh, probably maybe in my family or in my environment, but they never named that openly to me. So I did not feel judged. I felt supported by the people who were really close. But even that is not enough because um, the victim stays in that space where you feel very lonely, where you feel you are the only one who experiencing something like that. And as I said, the amount of shame and feeling guilty is incredible, and you can't overcome that easily and overnight. The worst thing is that you can stay in that space for many, many years. And you can be in that space even when you feel, oh, I think I finally I'm okay. I healed. I think I'm not broken anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But no, not really. Yes.
Just having someone, like you said, to hold us in that space that is non-judgmental, that you can feel the shame. Like you said, you can be really imperfect, you can be a little bit messy. You don't have to be able to articulate everything perfectly, and being able to actually move through that with a little bit of support with someone sitting there going, I'm just here. I'm here to listen. I'm here to hold you. And it's okay to show up like that. It's okay to show up with the snot on your face and the running mascara and the tears and maybe the pajamas you haven't changed for 3 days. And we can just be here together. And you're right. It really is such a healing space to be in that space with someone, regardless of the situation. But if you're just going through something that is really challenging, the depth that you can be held in that when someone can give you that space, let alone when you then have the shame on top of it and maybe the guilt and the embarrassment and like you mentioned before, the what if it's all my fault and what if they're going to think it's all my fault as well. Just to be able to sit with someone and go, hey, I've got you. We
Yes.
can just show up here and be messy together. And you can have this space to do what you need to do. And it's almost like a processing space, a little bit, being able to share that and be held by someone in that way, like emotionally held by someone.
Yes, absolutely. Uh, that's the only way to understand that what happened to you, it's not who you are. That whatever identity you created through a certain experience is how the brain, well, I have to say, play games with us. How, how that's the way how ego protecting itself, creating all these different identities. And whatever I was going through, none of that was part of who I am, but I didn't know that. You know, when we're talking about therapy, about psychology, and then about coaching, why not? People have that, many, not all of us, have that discomfort
Mhm.
and believe that's nothing's wrong with me. I'm perfect. I don't need help. But one very smart woman told me, she probably heard that from someone else, but it doesn't really matter. We are not, we are not islands. The people are not islands. We need to be there for each other and live with each other. So um, I think everything what happened and how I understand my experience now was very helpful to guided me to understand what is my mission. And there is no way that I'm going to say this in any kind of motivational, spiritual way. What is my mission? Because it's not. I was thinking about that a lot when I chose to be a coach. I chose it because I really genuinely, deep inside me, wanted to share my experience and how to heal from that. Yes, I was abused physically and mentally, but that's not who I am. And I decided that it won't identify me anymore. Yes, it took me probably 20, I won't say plus, but plus years to learn many things, and I will learn until the end of my life. That's okay. But I realized that my mission is not to save other women and other victims. My mission in my life was myself. There is nothing outside of us. We everything who we are and what is important we carry on inside of us. Everything what we are looping in our head are probably the stories, ideas of, you know, who we are. And trust me, most of them are not true. So, yes,
Yeah,
I
it's
uh,
important.
I want to
Um,
speak now if I did not speak when I was younger.
Beautiful. I love that you want to speak now and I guess almost give that to your younger self, give that to your version of you that didn't know how to, now that you can do that. And it was so beautifully put. My mission is not to save everyone else. My mission is just myself and to keep
Yeah,
growing and to keep being the best version of me that I can be, essentially. Um, I know that we've talked about your marriage and that space through your 20s. And I just wanted to check in and see, is there any other parts of your journey that you feel like are just as important or equally important that you wanted to bring into this conversation?
there is, and thank you for asking. There is a part of my personal story that I don't speak often in this way. And it's not because I'm ashamed. I'm not. It's just, uh, how can I put that into words? You know, some pain that we carry on is specific in a way that you cannot describe it, and in a way not to make it smaller than it is. I don't know if that makes sense. So while I was experience this kind of abuse, I was also once when I left separated from my children for years, and that happened not by my choice. And regarding that, I just want to say this: only a parent who has lived through that specific kind of separation knows what it actually feels like, to know that they are there, to know what they are being told. Um, but you are completely unable to reach them. You have to wait. Um, and you have to wait with a kind of patience that sometimes it feels like physically impossible to be patient and wait for what, but wait for the moment when you can find your way back into their life. And that moment fortunately happened to me. um, but that waiting leaves something in you that does not fully go away ever. And I think it's very important to name that. And I'm not want to name that because I'm asking for sympathy. Um, just because there might be a parents who are listening, and maybe they are going through that, they are inside that experience right now. And I want them to know that waiting is not end of story. Yes, it's incredibly hard, but it's not end of story. And they say there is a silver lining, I guess, in English language. Yes, there is. So you can experience abuse, but that abuse is not important as much the fact that I was also separated from my kids. You forget the physical pain. You cannot forget the other one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you for asking. That was hardest part of my story.
And thank you for sharing that so vulnerably as well. I'm sure that not being a parent myself, like you said, you just can't imagine what that feels like, but I'm sure that it's still not easy to talk about at points in time. And so thank you for sharing that and just for being able to, like you said, if there's anyone that is going through that situation, know that there are other people that have gone through it. And, like you said, the waiting is not the end of the story. And I got goosebumps when you said that. And I hope that for anyone in that situation, that that is also true,
It
that they're
is.
able to move to that silver lining afterwards, even if it's
Yeah,
really painful in the in between.
there is something very powerful sitting with a friend like you are, and feeling safe to be vulnerable, um, sharing and talking about something that maybe even a couple of years ago I was still ashamed to talk about, just because as a human beings we can be very judgmental. But what I'm realizing now, there is no need to be scared to speak just because our brain creating the story that might happen or not, that people will say or not. Um, no. So how important is to be with someone who can be not judgmental. This is the perfect example because I am fully aware that it's not only you here. There are gonna be a lot more people listening and maybe see something familiar in the story, um, or maybe felt triggered with my story. So there is one thing that I want to point out too. I want to be very clear about that this is not about blame, and I mean that. So this is not me as a woman against all the men on the other side. No. Um, but there might be a message to them or to any person who is, I'm not talking about abusers. I'm talking about the people who stay quiet because, to be honest, in today's world, um, and it's not happening only in my country, in Serbia, it's happening around the world. um, the women will come out and speak, and then the focus in on her and what she experienced, and she was questioning about her experience, and no one is talking about abuser anymore. um, I still believe there is no weakness in asking for help, and even the person who is abuser, it could be man, it could be a woman. Um, there is no loss in dignity if you are saying, okay, I'm struggling and I need support. Something
Mm,
is wrong. I have no control and I need support. And, the real courage um, is actually ask for support. Um, because, working on yourself, honestly, it's the only thing that can actually shift anything for you, right? And for anyone around you. So this is a message to people who stay silent while they watch um, people who are doing harm. You know, it's very important to speak to them too. The silence um, is not a loyalty, and it's not, for sure, it's not respect. How I see that is a choice, and I will try to put that in a proper words. So it's a choice to make someone else's safety um, less important than your own comfort. And the choice to be silent has a cost. That's, someone else gonna pay. So violence, it's not a power. I fully understand that now that it's a cry, um, and that cry deserves to be heard too, but not repeated. So as much as today's um, subject that we choose is maybe hard, and as I said, triggering to anyone, it is a call for everyone to look that maybe with a little bit different perspective and put the judgment on the side when we're facing the situation like that.
Uh, Absolutely. And I think you've touched on some really good points that are maybe a little bit edgy in society as well. But
Yeah,
when we, like you said, we take away that judgment, we take away that shame, we take away
yeah,
some of those things, that the truth underneath it is that there's absolutely space, that in those circumstances, in those situations, that sometimes everybody needs support. And
exactly.
that can be a very real thing as well. And um, I think it can be something that's also really important to touch on, just to add to that, is that if you are in the space of maybe dealing with one of these situations yourself and you are in that role of the victim at the time, if the other person who is doing the abuse also needs support, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's your responsibility to give it. Because I know that that's
Absolutely.
something that is um, very much what happens that keeps these situations going. And so it is very much okay to go, that person needs some support, but to look after me, I also need to leave and get my own support for
Exactly.
myself, and letting them have a little bit of self responsibility to get the support that they need as well, or maybe being able to bring someone else in who's able to do that. Um, and I just feel like that's important to touch on as well. But
Absolutely.
yeah,
Beautifully
it's
said. Beautifully said.
thank you. It is one of those things where there's a lot of nuances sometimes, and when we can take away that judgment, at the end of the day, it's how do people need support and who is the right person to give it to them. And that goes for friendships, therapists, relationships. Like you said, are you the person that's on the side that might be seeing something happening and you can see that you could bring in some support to shift the situation as well? Um, but doing it in a way that not necessarily keeps us comfortable, but keeps us safe. And those two things can be very different. And so, like
Yeah.
you said, not going into that loyalty of, or going into that, oh, but it's hard for me to say something, so I'm just not going to. But how can I do that in a way that also keeps me physically and emotionally safe while still being able to move through that discomfort? And I just think that's a beautiful message that you've brought through towards the end of this conversation today.
No
Um,
problem.
I want to say thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story, for trusting me to be able to hold you through that. I know that this is going to go out, there's going to be a lot of other people seeing that, but I also know there's a lot of trust that goes into being in this space specifically together,
Absolutely.
and trusting that I can hold you through that non-judgmentally, so that this story can go out to other people who need to hear it as well. And I know that I feel a little bit more healed with my journey through our conversation today, and I hope that other people do as well. Did you have anything that you wanted to bring in that um, you really wanted anyone in a similar situation to you to hear, as a bit of a last message, as a bit of a last gift to give them?
Um, I don't know how much I was able to bring close this situation, but my choice to go to talk openly about that is my wish, an invitation for other people to join, and not to be scared or ashamed to talk about that. And I repeat that many times throughout today's conversation. Um, I wish I can turn back to I can actually talk with the younger myself and um, say her the same and tell her that, look, don't worry, one day you're gonna speak about your experience, but not from shame. Um, you're gonna be a doorway um, for other women to talk about that. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to put the words that I just, coming up on my own language to put into English. Sometimes they don't make sense, but um, yes, maybe there is some younger women going through the same situation, and I just want them to know that they just need to reach out, not once, many times. The right person is somewhere there to listen.
Beautiful. What a gorgeous message to give to your younger self, but also anyone else that the right people are there, the right people will be able to hold you and they will be able to listen. And sometimes you may have to reach out more than once, but to
Exactly.
find that person, it is worth it. Even though it's
Yes,
challenging, it is worth it to find that person that can hold you through that. And um, as we close up this call today, obviously Eleanor and I are trained coaches, and so we will have some space after this call together in private where I will make sure that she's held and we'll do what we spoke about before. But if you
yes,
have,
please.
of course, if you have listened to this today and you are feeling a little bit of that edge, you're feeling a little bit triggered, a little bit of discomfort, make sure you hold yourself as well. So make a cup of tea, go out in the sunshine, lay down, listen to some music, have a little dance, speak to someone if you want to speak to someone, and make sure that you're able to hold yourself as well, because that's really important, even if it's just for 5 minutes.
Exactly. Or you can speak with us.
Absolutely. Eleanor obviously has a lot of lived experience as well as a coaching degree that she brings into this. And if you've felt really connected either with her or myself, we are always here every single time. And if you just want to connect with us through watching between us, that is okay too. So we
Absolutely.
are two coaches that come in
Yes,
and enjoy having these conversations together. This is what our relationship looks like in real life when we're not recording, and this is what our conversations look like in real life too. So we just give you a little bit of a sneak peek into that, in the hopes that you feel a little bit less lonely, a little bit more supported, and you're able to build a little bit of awareness and some tools so that you can come back to yourself and be able to live with who you are now.
absolutely. Thank you, Molly, for holding the space for me. And you know what? The sun come out
Oh,
while we were
amazing.
talking.
I love that. I know it's been raining there for you today, so that's perfect.
Yes. See you,
Beautiful. Thank you
Molly.
for your vulnerability today, and we'll see you in a fortnight.